Welcome to another segment of the Grassy Knoll. This is December 20th, 2006. And with us today are the brothers Collins, Philip and Paul. This all began a long time ago with they're talking about their first work, I believe first published work, which was The Ascendancy of the Scientific Dictatorship. And here we are. And by the way, guys, first of all, hello and welcome back.
Thanks for having us, Viz.
Now let me ask you, what year was that published?
Oh, the first edition was published, of The Ascendancy was published in 2003, and the new edition is 2006, and it's twice the size of the original. And before that, Paul actually authored a book by himself. It was called The Hidden Face of Terrorism.
Right.
It was released 2002. All I did was edit it. So.
Well, the reason I ask is, I guess at this time of the year, you kind of look back a little bit more than you do normally, and the time is. So I must have had you on not long after that Ascendancy came out.
Yeah. It was very shortly after it was released.
3 years ago. Holy mackerel!
We did the Magicians of Mutability series.
That's right.
Yeah.
Did you get a chance to listen to any of the president's press conference?
Oh, the president's press. I just heard a tiny small bit of it before the show. Just a tiny small portion of the same. I mean, it got so it's
redundant.
Repetition. Yeah, the repetition has gotten so that they all merged together into one big press conference. So I mean, like the same thing. We will win in Iraq, yada yada. So I kind of discarded it as nothing of it really any value to speak of.
Well, just mildly, it reminds me of what took place in May of 1970. They talk about pulling out, and then they jack up the stakes. We were hearing about withdrawals in April of 1970, and of course Nixon okayed going into Cambodia. Everybody went ballistic across the country. This is what begat, obviously, Kent State, which is close to your guys' hearts in a sense, at least geographically.
Yeah.
The other thing is, it also brings back to mind that this is what I would call the Waco strategy. We ain't coming out.
Right.
So, all right, now to the matters at hand. We kind of promoted the show by saying that we were going to talk about documents that are a little bit mysterious in authorship. Sometimes they're called hoaxes. Most times they're called hoaxes, but are anything but. And we were going to lead off with what you guys have just done. And folks, you can go to conspiracyarchive.com and read about the article they've written about MJ-12. You can hit that site from my site. It's on the homepage. Just hit it and go to commentary. And you guys have your own little spot there, do you?
Yeah, it's altogether it's www.conspiracyarchive.com/commentary with a capital C /Collins with a capital C .php. And you want to get those uppercase letters, otherwise you won't work. No man's land. So yeah.
Okay, and if you do go to the homepage, hit commentary, and you'll find your way through to them very quickly. All right, so tell us first of all the time MJ-12 came out and what it all entailed.
Well, first of all, when the audience hears that we are speaking to the topic of the MJ-12 documents, the first thing that will probably come to the minds of most people is why in the world are these two even touching this topic? And it's a fair question, I think, for two reasons. The first one is that our studies into elite criminality have focused by and large on the terra firma. And the second is the fact that when one looks into the body of UFO literature out there, the first thing that comes to mind is just how much of it is toilet paper. With a few notable exceptions, UFO literature is almost completely useless. Even that which is classified as Christian ufology is little more than compost. For example, talk among Christians about Nephilim traveling through stargates clearly illustrates that, like their secular ufology counterparts, Christian ufologists really have a tough time distinguishing between reality and fantasy. But that being said, MJ-12 is still an important topic to talk about. It's not a question of whether they are a hoax or not. Through our research, we have become satisfied with the conclusion that they are a hoax. They're important because of the kind of situation that they depict. They basically put forward the idea or concept of a technocratic group, a group of policy professionals that are sidestepping democracy in the name of dealing with alien visitation, both of a hostile and of a peaceful nature. And if you'll notice, many of the proponents of MJ-12, those individuals out there who hold on to the idea that the MJ-12 documents are in fact genuine, really have no problem with the idea of a kind of technocratic group dealing with the situation. What they have a problem with is the secrecy, and they believe that it should all just be done out in the open, and that this kind of situation should be conducted in the public eye.
Yeah.
And
basically, what the documents, their importance is mainly in the paradigm that they cultivate. And they cultivate a technocratic paradigm. The documents surfaced in 1984, ironically enough, really there. But they purported to be the product of a group of policy professionals that were allegedly established by an executive order of President Truman on September 24th, 1947. But the documents present a technocratic theme. As Paul said, the documents purport to be the product of a special study group charged with the responsibility of dealing with an alien presence. Now, such a coterie of policy professionals would qualify as a technocracy. Now, and technocracy, for the listening audience, those who don't know, technocracy defined in classical political terms is a system of governance in which so-called professionals, experts, rule by virtue of their specialized knowledge, of their scientific expertise, and basically reigned supreme in the dominant political and economic institutions. But the MJ-12 group, or the alleged MJ-12 group, qualifies as a technocracy because of their supposed capability to operate outside of the democratic parameters of a representative republic. Now, the rationale for the maintenance of such an anti-democratic machination is, as Paul mentioned, the overwhelming gravity of a possible alien invasion. Now, direct external threats have always provided politically and socially expedient pretexts for totalitarians, even if it's something as fantastic as an alien invasion. In a nutshell, the fear of invasion from beyond prompts the masses to exchange their liberties for ostensible security.
All right, let me hold you right there for a second. To corroborate what you said, this is out of something that, again, we wonder about, a little nebulous, the report from Iron Mountain.
Absolutely. In fact, it's great that you bring that up. That's right where I was headed with it. The report from Iron Mountain, in that report, it briefly examined the possibility of invoking an alien invasion to achieve just such an end, to achieve the exchange of liberties for security. Now, as to the authenticity of the report from Iron Mountain, it was hotly debated when it first surfaced, when it was published by Leonard Lewin. But one of the things that lends a certain degree of corroborative evidence to its favor was that L. Fletcher Prouty, who certainly doesn't qualify as a fringe researcher, L. Fletcher Prouty, said that the report certainly appeared authentic to him, and at the very least, the report from Iron Mountain was echoing several of the ideas that were proffered by McNamara's whiz kids. So if the report from Iron Mountain is indeed a fiction, chances are it's more of a roman à claif, and that is it's actually premised on some real and legitimate ideas that were tossed about by government think tanks and by individuals such as McNamara's whiz kids. Well, the thing to realize about
of the report from Iron Mountain isn't so much whether or not it's authentic, it's to realize that the paradigm presented in the paper may actually be a close approximation, a reflection of reality.
I want you to get back to the alien external menace, but let me just read you a paragraph here from Iron Mountain, real short, 2-sentence job. It says, the existence of an accepted external menace, then, is essential to social cohesiveness, as well as to the acceptance of political authority. The menace must be believable, it must be of a magnitude consistent with the complexity of the society threatened, and it must appear at least to affect the entire society. Okay.
Absolutely.
I'm done. Go ahead.
And it's interesting, in the report from Iron Mountain, when it references the possibility of exploiting a direct external threat from space, the report was a little less than enthusiastic about the prospects of using such a threat. It says, quote, experiments, or that is UFO experiments, have been proposed to test the credibility of an out-of-our-world invasion threat. It is possible that a few of the more difficult-to-explain flying saucer incidents of recent years were in fact early experiments of this kind. If so, they could hardly have been judged encouraging, unquote. So, of course, the report was a little less than encouraging. However, this statement prompts one to rethink certain previous events that involved UFOs. It mentions the possibility that experiments had been conducted in creating an illusory alien threat. And this prompts one to rethink Orson Welles' famous War of the Worlds broadcast. It is possible that the Welles broadcast was one such experiment in fear. The panic surrounding the War of the Worlds broadcast drew the attention of none other than the oligarchical Rockefeller dynasty. The General Education Board, which is a Rockefeller machination, financed a research group at Princeton University to examine the panic of the Orson Welles' broadcast. Now, this group was composed of 3 individuals that were prominent within the social sciences, Frank Stanton, Paul Lazarsfeld, and Hadley Cantrell. Cantrell would write The Invasion from Mars, a study in the psychology of panic. And in that book, Cantrell observed that the masses' tendency to rely on a higher power or some stronger entity, which on a socio-political level typically translates to the state, when faced with an alien invasion, that tendency is excited. Thus, we see how such a hypothetical scenario could be instrumental in the enshrinement and maintenance of the absolute state. The point is that an extraterrestrial presence, whether menacing or benign, is considered a potentiality with which democratic government cannot cope. But it comes as little surprise that the social sciences and sociologists took note of the event and basically examined the event much more closely. The social sciences, which were inherently technocratic from their very origins, have always been concerned with the maintenance of a collectivist society. And modern sociologists are taking note of the usefulness of UFO cults. William Sims Bainbridge, who himself is a sociologist, he in one of his essays recommended for social scientists to work in tandem with UFO cults, and basically recommended that the sociologists become what he called a religious engineer, and that is a religious engineer basically skillfully, systematically creates a new religion. And so basically what he was recommending was the technocratic concept of a sociocracy. Now, this concept was developed by Auguste Comte, the principal disciple of St. Simon and the father of modern sociology. Basically, a sociocracy is a scientific theocracy where social scientists act as the governing priesthood. Sociologists identify the social and political needs of the state and sculpt the state religion according to these needs. this concept is inherently technocratic because it promotes the alleged expertise of social scientists as the dominant ecclesiastical authority. Now, of course, social sciences, again, as I mentioned, have been technocratic to the core, not to mention collectivistic and just plain totalitarian. These deeply embedded technocratic propensities within the social sciences owe their existence to the lingering influence of Comte's mentor, St. Simon. Even before Auguste Comte formalized sociology as a field of study, St. Simon, his mentor, had developed a so-called science of man premised upon a physiological interpretation of society. St. Simon extended radical empiricism, and that is the belief in sense certainty, the belief that all knowledge is derived from the senses. He extended that epistemological doctrine to the whole of the social body, thus making society analogous to a social organism whose sum was greater than its constituent parts. Out of this physiological or organic interpretation of society would arise the political doctrine of collectivism, that is, the subordination of the individual to the collective. After all, if society is nothing more than one nebulous social organism, then the individual is reduced to a cell and has no more rights than a cell. The cell is subordinate to the body. But this was the common doctrinal foundation for both communism and fascism, which amount to little more than the variants of the same technocratic system.
Well, let me ask you guys where you're coming from. We just got done yesterday and the week before with looking at eugenics, the proponents of that going back, obviously, to the 19th century. And we also touched upon this index they're coming up with to, I guess, qualitatively and quantitatively decide just what kind of quality of life you do have. You'll come out with a certain percentage or value. Now, given what you're talking about now, do you not see that this is probably where a one-world government is headed?
Absolutely, it's very good. It's very astute of you to recognize that. With in particular UFO cults, Jacques Vallée noted that the UFO cults have reintroduced the idea of a chosen people, of a chosen race, very much analogous to the German Volk, to the Aryan, and that UFO cults and the UFO phenomena itself promises what he calls a high-demand religion, and that high-demand religion will favor a particular hierarchy, a particular group of people with whom the supposed visitors will commune, with whom the aliens will commune.
But
I'm sorry.
Oh no, well, I want to throw this and go right back again.
Sure.
So hold on to your thought. I just don't want to let this get away. Now, I think from the information that you've all integrated, there's a lot of pie in the sky, sunshine, high tower types that believe socialism is the answer because they really do believe that that's a construct based on equality that will work.
Right.
Now, you know that's a bag of dung.
Yeah, that's.
But those same types, I would find, would embrace something from outside, a deus ex machina, if you would, that would come and finally save us all.
That's right.
That cord runs through everything, and I understand why people would want what we see on paper, but it doesn't ever work because human beings are corrupt.
That's right.
All right. Now, go back to where you were going, but this whole idea about somebody saving all of us runs through, all these, I guess, premises.
A messianic thread, if you will.
Yeah, that's it. 2 words, you got it.
Well, to give an example, to give an excellent example of a UFO cult in particular that endorses world government, endorses technocracy, technocratic governance, and also endorses the idea of a kind of an Aryan racial aristocracy. You have the Raelian movement, which was an atheistic UFO cult founded in the 1970s. In the Raelians, one of their chief religious tracts entitled "Intelligent Design Message from the Designers." The French atheist by the name of Rail presented a physiological portrait of human governance, and I'll quote it verbatim for the edification of the audience. Quote, "Each person is a useful cell in this huge body we call humanity. The cell in your foot should not decide whether or not your hand should pick up a given object. It is the brain which must decide, and if the object in question is good, the cell of your foot will benefit from it," unquote. Now, this virtually almost mirrors the statements of Ernest Haeckel, who was the chief mentor of Adolf Hitler, who indoctrinated Adolf Hitler into social Darwinism. Ernest Haeckel said that the cell of an organism, and I'll quote him verbatim, quote, "though autonomous, is subordinated to the body as a whole. In the same way in the societies of bees, ants, and termites, in the vertebrate herds, and in the human state, each individual is subordinate to the social body of which he is a member," unquote. Of course, Ernest Haeckel offered up an elite, a racial elite that occupied the developmental capstone of the physiological state. And for him, it was the Aryan. Now, in the Raelian movement, the UFO cult of Rael, they offer up a cognitive elite. They call it a geneocracy. But this, which is basically people who have been placed in power by virtue of their supposed genius. And basically the democratic processes, the right to vote, is consolidated and restricted to only those that the Rail movement considers cognitively superior enough to vote. But this geneocracy, it virtually mirrors, the concept virtually mirrors that of Ernest Haeckel's racial aristocracy. It also mirrors the concept of a democracy of experts that was offered by H.G. Wells. If I'm not mistaken, H.G. Wells first presented that concept in The Open Conspiracy. I could be wrong. But at any rate, to give you an idea of just how deep the thread of Aryan Hitlerian thinking runs, before 1991, the Rail movement's official symbol was a swastika enclosed within two interlocking triangles. Now, the swastika, of course, held esoteric significance for the Nazi Party's inner circle, which was composed of practicing occultists. Well, needless to say, a lot of eyebrows raised when they saw the Rail movement sporting the same sort of symbol. So public relations considerations basically led the Raelian movement to basically get rid of the swastika in 1991. But the continuity of thought remains evident, and that is this idea of a racial aristocracy, of a hierarchical society, of a technocratic form of governance. All of these trains of thoughts, these thematic threads remain evident.
And if the elite can introduce that through a UFO visitation, whether it be hostile or friendly, they'd certainly be willing to try to conduct such a hoax. Just because the Iron Mountain group was dissatisfied with experiments into UFO visitation and the effect that it had on the population doesn't mean that other sections and factions of the power elite did not find the idea still feasible. And I'll give you an example. There was a memo from H. Marshall Caldwell, the Assistant Director for Scientific Intelligence in the CIA. He wrote this memo to the DCI at the time, Walter Smith. And in that memo, he said, quote, "The public concerns with the phenomena, the UFO phenomena that is, which is reflected both in the United States press and in the pressure of inquiry upon the Air Force indicates that a fair proportion of our population is mentally conditioned to the acceptance of the incredible. In this fact lies the potential for the touching off of mass hysteria and panic, unquote. So certain other sections and factions of the power elite found that you could actually strain credulity to a greater extent than what the Iron Mountain group believed possible. And if you look at the UFO community and the different UFO buffs out there, it's really not that hard to fool them. The MJ-12 documents are not the best hoax that I've ever seen. There's lots of different errors in those documents that are a dead giveaway that they are not authentic. But there are still individuals out there like William Moore, Jaime Chandray, and Stanton Friedman who may in fact be covert operatives themselves who believe that they are the real deal, and people by the boatloads in the UFO community still cling to them as if they are.
What?
Just look at. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I want to ask you guys a question, but go ahead.
Just look at one of the individuals who authenticated the MJ-12 documents, Richard M. Bissell Jr. In a letter to Lee Graham, Bissell said that he thought the MJ-12 briefing document was authentic. Now, Richard Bissell Jr.'s establishment pedigree is a pretty firmly established fact. His brother is William Truesdale Bissell, and he was a member of a secret society at Yale known as Skull and Bones. And of course, Bissell's father, Richard M. Bissell Sr., was the director of the Neuropsychiatric Institute of the Hartford Retreat for the Insane. And one of the institute's patients was Clifford Beers, who went on to found the Mental Hygiene Society. And the Mental Hygiene Society, of course, was deeply involved in the infamous MK-Ultra CIA mind control projects. But this gives you an idea.
Another important thing about Bissell is that he worked as an aide to Dulles, and he is the one who is credited with having put together the teams that were involved in the Bay of Pigs and worked with the Cuban exiles. And the core purpose of that whole project was probably not to remove Castro so much as it was, as Tarpley and Chaikin pointed out in their book over George Bush, to create a multi-use assassination team. And that assassination team would pop up in the death of Orlando Letelier, who was the ambassador from Salvador Allende's Chile here in the United States.
Yeah, also
they pop up in the Watergate scandal. They pop up in the JFK scandal itself.
Yeah, the JFK assassination, Contra Wars, Operation Phoenix.
Well, you're talking about a man who has spent the majority of his adult life involved in a career of deceit and deception, and when he gave kind of his blessing to the MJ-12 documents, which he eventually recanted somewhere down the road, and all. But when he gave it, Lee Graham and people en masse in the UFO community believed and embraced them wholeheartedly, and again, this points to just how gullible the people in that particular sector of society are, and they can be manipulated and pushed this way and that way by these different covert operators. So the idea of using the UFO phenomena to manipulate society is still considered very much feasible by certain factions of the power elite.
Well, let's take a look at this. I mean, I don't pay that much attention to it. I don't know how much it changes things now, but you have to admit, I mean, well, you don't have to admit anything, but I mean, I go back to the 50s, okay, and you could start to talk about UFOs and not get laughed even out of the classroom back in those days, like right around, I'd say, the mid to late 60s. Incident at Exeter, I think, kind of broke some ground when that book came out. That made it a little more legitimate. But, you know, something is going on. I mean, you guys, I guess, are very close to Wright Patterson, right?
Oh, yeah.
All right, now, you know, I mean, I've seen stuff, and we don't know if it's military. We don't know if it's extraterrestrial. I mean, what is the point to all this? And also, don't you believe that this acceptance of something from out there, that's salvific, is something we might be witnessing, as it says in Scripture?
Absolutely.
So what's the role? What do you think the deal is really about leaving the UFOs right out there on the fringe for everybody to at least tap into once in a while, with nobody clearly really understanding what the origin of this is? And I would suppose that confusion is deliberate.
Well, basically, what the UFOs, and it's very interesting that you bring up the religious significance of UFOs and the UFO phenomena. The purpose that they're serving is the creation of a myth, and by the use of the term myth, I'm referring to it in the context that it was used by the French romanticist Georges Sorel, and the Sorelian myth is not so much a deliberate falsehood, although it could very well be a lie, but it's more so an ideology that was fabricated for the purposes of action, without really much attention paid to the questions of its truth or falsehood. So, and basically, you have the Sorelian myths down throughout the centuries were promoted by individuals like Marx, who promoted a Sorelian myth of the workers' paradise, classless society. Also Nietzsche, who offered up his own Sorelian myth, which was the Ubermensch, the rise of a Superman. But with the UFO phenomena, we have the rise of a new scientistic myth, and by scientistic, I mean that it's derived from the religion of scientism, and that is the belief that science is the dominant epistemology, and that it should be extended to all fields of inquiry, and it basically limits all truth to this ontological plane of existence, to the physical cosmos. Okay, so what basically you see rising up in the UFO community, particularly amongst individuals like Van Daniken and others, is the confusion of God with extraterrestrial life. Now, as Paul and I demonstrate in our article, this is merely a new incarnation of neo-Gnostic, what's known as neo-Gnostic emanetization. That is, to assert that Yahweh is an alien and Jesus was his cosmonaut. It's the same to basically do what the neo-Gnostics, which were basically the communists and the fascists, they qualify as neo-Gnostics. You do exactly what they did, and that is you transplant the transcendent, you conceptualize transcendent realities within the ontological plane of the physical universe. The secular Gnostics of communism, fascism did precisely the same thing. They attempted to do what's known as emanetize the eschaton. That is, bring the end of days, the end of the age, so to speak, here to this physical plane of existence. And in so doing, they transformed a transcendent object of faith into an object of immanent experience. So basically, they eviscerated the heavens, they eviscerated the traditional Abrahamic faiths, transplanted the concepts, though, the metaphysical concepts of those faiths here, those spiritual concepts within the ontological plane of the physical cosmos, and then but through that transplantation attempted to erect an earthly heaven without God. The UFO community, particularly UFO cults, are guilty of the same philosophical fallacy and work towards the same thing. You see, for instance, the Raelian movement, again, to offer up their example, they offer an emanetized eschaton, they offer up an earthly heaven, a world government, in their own religious literature. In Intelligent Design, again, one of their sacred texts, they say, quote, "You must also see to it that all nations of the earth unite to form only one government, unquote. And why is this? Well, earlier in the text, you find out that basically they claim that Elohim, who of course for Christians is God, Elohim they say was a race of intelligent extraterrestrials that created man. And in doing this, they're taking God, who, of course, as we know, according to the scriptures, is a spirit. As is made clear in the scriptures, he's in Hebrews 12, chapter 12, verse 9. Paul refers to Yahweh, God, as the Father of spirits. And in John chapter 4, verse 24, Jesus made it clear that God was, is a spirit and that he must be worshipped in the spirit. But by asserting that Elohim, that Yahweh, that God is an extraterrestrial, you're taking a spiritual concept, transplanting it within the physical cosmos, basically reconceptualizing God as corporeal, which the only time that God could really have been, corporeal was when the Word became flesh, when he became Jesus Christ.
Let me ask you this. Now, Elohim, is that not the Hebrew word for the plurality of the Godhead?
It's actually we don't see it so much as something that proves Trinitarian thought for real. We think it's more likely, as Michael Heiser pointed out, God and the council, the heavenly council.
Yeah, the divine council.
The divine council. Michael Heiser, by the way, is an excellent biblical scholar. His work is also available on the internet. Basically, what he shows is that the Elohim is probably is a reference to the totality of a divine council with which God communed in the beginning, and that there were lesser Elohim, and that lesser entities to God that participated in creation.
Well, then it's through that interpretation, though, that you can see where the corruption of such has led to another, shall we say, celestial body.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's led to another, as John put it in his first epistle, another gospel that's being taught. And that's precisely what you have with the UFO cults. In physicalizing and manatizing spiritual entities, God, and basically transplanting God within the ontological plane of the physical universe. They're taking part in an older tradition, a neo-Gnostic tradition, which is inherently occult, which was the tradition of, again, the secular Gnostics of both communism and fascism. And in every case where this manatization has taken place, this sort of reconceptualization of God has taken place, there has always been some movement rising up to basically create heaven on earth. After all, if God is within the ontological plane of the physical universe, so is heaven, and we can realize that reality here and now. And you had that in Nazi, and now you have that, of course, with the current push for world government. And again, many individuals involved in the UFO community push for world government. As I quoted the Raelian movement just now, but also Stanton T. Friedman. Stanton Friedman ends all of his lectures basically with a mandate for global government, and he basically offers this little slightly sardonic rhetorical question at the end of every one of his lectures, and it goes, quote, "Who speaks for planet Earth? Argentina?" unquote. Thus inferring that there must be a global authority, a world governmental entity that will basically allow us to deal with an extraterrestrial presence, and it will be necessary if we are to be introduced to the cosmic neighborhood. So
it almost makes you think that faking an extraterrestrial entity would serve the purpose of, in other words, they'll create the canard so that people will then clamor for the one world government.
That's right.
As an agent that can best deal with it. And this is starting to eerily remind me about what I'm reading in the beginning of a book called Childhood's End.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Quote that one. We quote that one in the book too. In Childhood's End, there's a character named Stormgren,
right?
And the extraterrestrial overlords have basically arrived and their arrival has led to the dissolution of the nation-state system. And Stormgren says, "Quote: It is useless to cling to the past. Even before the overlords came to Earth, the sovereign state was dying. They have merely hastened its end. No one can save it now, and no one should try." Unquote. And interestingly enough, the appearance of the overlords themselves is relatively it's kind of frightening, because for all practical purposes they look like the devil. They have horns, they have wings, and they're ebony skin, and the insinuation being that Lucifer, Satan, was just a myth derived from some physical reality. And again, you have there again that tradition of neo-Gnostic ammanitization, that Lucifer is now transplanted within the physical cosmos. And of course, that's what the Luciferian religion does. The Luciferian religion doesn't interpret Satan or Lucifer as a literal metaphysical entity. Instead, he is an immanent energy that is within all of humanity, and all of humanity just has to tap into this immanent energy in order to achieve apotheosis, or that is to become God. But most of Arthur C. Clarke's work, anybody who reads it will see definite Luciferian overtones. There's very much a religion being touted in his work. 2001, The Space Odyssey, again, Childhood's End. All of them seem to basically have very much Luciferian overtones.
There is evidence, a body of evidence, to suggest that an experiment was already done to try to have a UFO equivalent of a second coming. And it ties right back into the MJ-12 topic, because when you look at one of the proponents of MJ-12 that brought it forward to the public for the first time, William Moore, he had contact with a group of individuals within the government that, in all likelihood, was the group known as the Aviary, and this group was supposedly a group of Department of Defense officers and scientists and intelligence officers who were wanting to get all this information out about UFOs and expose the whole government cover-up. One of the members of the Aviary was a Colonel John B. Alexander, and he was on the board of directors of a company called SciTech, which was a remote viewing company. And interestingly enough, that company had as one of its employees Major Edward Dames. Now, you and I would know who Dames is. Most of the audience would know. They've heard him on Art Bell before. And all. The interesting thing about Dames, I should point out, is that Malachi Martin, when he was still alive, he said that Art Bell was a shill, and then he referred to Ed Dames as a surrogate of the devil, and all. But anyways, Dames went on Art Bell's show and began talking about this spaceship being
hiding
alongside the Hale-Bopp comet.
Right.
And of course, this whole thing touched off the mass suicide of the Heaven's Gate cult, who believed that they would be teleported upon this ship when they killed themselves.
Yeah, whose doctrine, by the way, their inner religious doctrine was pure Gnosticism.
The man who owned the property that Heaven's Gate, the estate that the 39 members of Heaven's Gate were living at when they committed suicide, was a man by the name of Sam Kushka Fahani, who was an arms dealer to the Shah of Iran, and who was, by his own admission, an informant to the FBI in California. So it has all the tailorings of a kind of an intelligence operation, and it seems to me to be kind of an experiment in seeing if they could have a second coming kind of experience within a UFO context.
Actually, wasn't the project also there was a project at the time?
There was an operation being held by the FBI in California at that time, known as Operation Heaven's Gate. Whether that's coincidental or not, I can't. But it piques the interest.
Yeah, raises the eyebrows.
It should pique the interest of any researcher.
Well, and this is for another time, but more and more now I look back at the introduction of LSD and drugs and promiscuity and other wonderful elements back in the 60s.
Oh, yeah.
And I see that not as anything else except instigated by think tanks and perhaps the military.
Absolutely.
Just to see what would happen. And then you got to wonder amongst the rock stars of the time and such, and it even makes me kind of look back at Ken Kesey and just how much these fellows knew, and whether they were in on it or, it just takes everything that I lived through and now is casted through a different type of prism.
Right.
Funny I should use that word, but, very interesting. And you wonder how much we've been experimented on, not even with the real physical stuff like Legionnaire's disease, and we don't have to explain that, right? You're okay with that, maybe? That some of these things were not necessarily organic releases, but kind of like, let's see what happens.
Sure, yeah.
That's why I always like, I'm not going on any cruise ships, by the way. Doesn't anybody get it? I mean, with all the outbreaks they have on cruise ships, what a perfect population to experiment on. You got nobody getting on and getting off. So I don't know if you want to sign on with that, but this child ain't going on the Carnival cruise,
Well, of course, there's more historical cases. For instance, of course, there's the Tuskegee experience.
Yes.
I mean, give me a break. Syphilis. What effect do you think it will have on people?
Well, there you go. But there again, you have that attitude from an elite where, just like the book I read from yesterday, it's a war against the weak, or the infirm, or the the inferior in the case of African Americans.
Well, you're talking about, certain sectors of the population kind of being put in a petri dish and poked and prodded at by the elite. And I personally think that the people within the UFO community constitute just such a group, that they too are an experimental group where the elite throw out different ideas, different ideational contagions, if you will, and see where it takes them. Back with MJ-12, with the MJ-12 document, we see again the researcher Lee Graham, who had the documents authenticated by Richard M. Bissell Jr. He was contacted by William Moore, who was one of the individuals who brought the document to public light back in '84, when Graham met with Moore shown him a Defense Investigation Service badge, and claimed to be working on behalf of the government in an intelligence capacity. And so you have all these different spooks and covert operatives that you would find in any other kind of good spy story operating in and around the UFO community, making sure that certain pieces of information, that certain beliefs are disseminated. The effects are.
In that sense, that's where William Sims Bainbridge, who I mentioned earlier in the interview, his mandate for social scientists to become religious engineers and the resuscitation of the Comtean concept of a sociocracy has already been realized. Most of the psychological warfare operatives within the intelligence community have their talents sink deeply within the UFO community. But their psychological warfare stratagems were developed by earlier OSS social scientists. And so in this sense, in this diffuse ideational continuum you see here, the UFO community has already become something of a quasi-sociocracy. You have a body of adherents whose beliefs and religion are being shaped by religious engineers. In this case, the religious engineers are intelligence operatives that are using the same psychological warfare stratagems developed by earlier OSS social scientists.
Let me run something by you because we got 10 minutes left. I want to read something to you if I could, which one I think will strangely corroborate that Iron Mountain is not a fraud, though it's just a snapshot of it. But then I also want to ask you if it has a certain relationship, perhaps, to MJ-12. And let me ask you this: do you know what the official name of the draft legislation is? The official title?
No, I sure don't.
All right. It's the Universal National Service Act. It used to be the Universal Military Service Act. Now, having said that, let me read from Iron Mountain real quick. It's another possible surrogate for the control of potential enemies of society is the reintroduction in some form consistent with modern technology and political processes of slavery. And it goes on to talk about Wells, Huxley, and Orwell, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. Now it says, it is entirely possible that development of a sophisticated form of slavery may be an absolute prerequisite to social control in a world at peace. As a practical matter, conversion of the code of military discipline to a euphemized form of enslavement would entail surprisingly little revision.
Yeah, little revision.
Now, and here's the kicker and the last line. The logical first step would be the adoption of some form of, universal military service.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Now, having said that, if that doesn't make one wonder just how much of a hoax this was, I think this is more grounded in, I would say, reality than MJ-12. Now, this is stretching it, but it's a question I want to ask you. Do you think that MJ-12, even though it came, 17 years later, could that have been a little bit more, a tiny bit more of an injection of some kind of ludicrousness or just some kind of way out stuff that might turn people away from perhaps the Iron Mountain document and put them more at ease that this thing is really crazy? Now, it may not be, so tell me what you think.
Well, I think basically what you're saying to a certain extent, it holds some validity because what it did was it took policies as presented in the report from Iron Mountain, and it basically reintroduced them in more euphemistic terms. And as a result, it eased people into the technocratic paradigm much more comfortably than, say, the report from Iron Mountain would have. The report from Iron Mountain automatically prompts shock, prompts a great deal of fear and suspicion. The MJ-12 documents, however, redirect people's attention away from this coterie of policy professionals that it alleges to be the product of, and redirects their attention towards what? A direct external threat. An alien presence, a possible alien presence. And so what happens? No longer is the enemy, is the threat now from within, it's from without. And so psychologically, people have been, more or less conditioned to fear something falling from the heavens instead of fearing what's, probably the real enemy who's sitting on a hill in Washington. The certain themes that we find there in that quote from Iron Mountain do pop up in the UFO community, such as the reinstitution of slavery. There's this idea amongst UFO believers of what is known as a star seed, which is the idea that some of us are actually the descendants of people that had intercourse with aliens, and so those particular people who are the descendants
and the products of this union are actually of superior stock, and all the other people should be under them and should be servants.
Yeah, and the sons of God looked upon the daughters of man and found it fair, and so evidently there are some people who are the seeds of that union. And those people constitute a racial aristocracy.
Well, nobody knows really whatever happened to the product of that union, which was referred to as the Men of Renown.
Right.
So something is going on, and I think again this is the basis that they spin from to come on to. Okay.
But another thing that you brought up, of course, in that quote is the draft, and the idea that in the case of alien visitation that would be hostile in nature, the idea that a draft would not be instituted and all is ludicrous. Of course, it would be instituted and all. It would be instituted worldwide because there would be a mass mobilization to deal with a mass military mobilization to deal with what is considered to be a technologically superior threat from outside of the Earth's atmosphere, and no one would even question it. The constitutional questions would not even be raised at that point in time. The amazement and the fear on the part of the general public would basically cause them to psychologically go into a paralysis mode, and they wouldn't be those questions wouldn't even be asked at that point.
Well, also remember too that today in the New York Times there's an article about Bush basically what I see as a call out for more volunteers. It's not a draft, but it has the effect of trying to get. Obviously, they want to expand the Army and the Marines. And that came out in today's Times, as I said. So, and the other thing is, no matter, all administrations have played games with labor statistics and unemployment and all that. So I never listen. I mean, you guys can look out your window, you look in the newspaper, you know that things are either going well or they're not.
Right.
But in an economy which I think is shrinking, imploding, if you will, what better way to get people to come into the service than say it's the best job you're going to be able to get out there?
Absolutely. Well, everybody I know who has entered the military or who is going into the military, every single one of them, I mean, I don't know a single one of them who is doing it out of some sense of duty. Every single one of them cites socioeconomic circumstances for their entry. I have to, I have to pay for the house, I have to pay for a kid, or I have to this, that, the other, and everything. All of it's socioeconomic in origin.
I never hear the patriotic speech either. I hear, well, I knocked this girl up, a baby's on the way, it's about 9 months out from now, I got to do something.
Yeah.
That's what I hear.
Yeah.
Well, what I also noticed with our soldiers coming back, especially when they get interviewed by your local networks and the local stations, there's a tendency not for them to go on about, making Iraq free. It's more like they actually just use the words, I did my job, my job is over, that was my job.
Right.
And I think that's telling us something as well,
Yeah. Well, there's no real moral, the sort of morality underscoring the mission. That now it's just be done out of simply a obligation, a contract, so to speak, between this individual and the state.
This is probably more suitable for our future forecast that we're going to do 28th or 29th with you, but I might as well just throw it out there right now anyways. And
okay.
The only two real viable options to the power elite in Iraq, in my estimation, is either balkanization of the country or the reinstitution of a strong man, not unlike Saddam Hussein, but just friendly to America again, as Saddam Hussein was at one time.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there because we're running out of time, but folks, they'll be back on the 28th and 29th with a whole lot more to talk about. Philip and Paul, thanks for coming on. If you want, we'll just mark it right there and pick it up next week, if that's okay with you guys.
Sure thing, Viz. Thanks for having us.
Hey, listen, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it, and we'll talk to you next week.
Okie doke.
All right, God bless you. Bye-bye.